Hey guys, welcome to my Retribution Paladin DPS guide for Legion, patch 7.0.3. Now in this guide I'm going to go over your talents, spells and abilities, your artifact traits and pathing options, your stat priority, and then your DPS rotation for single target and AoE, as well as demonstrations of those, and then macros and add-ons to help yourself out. Let's go ahead and look at your talents first. In your first tier, essentially the further into your artifact weapon traits you are, the better that final verdict gets. So this will end up being your default choice, which is kind of nice because it's very passive and simple to use. Execution sentence though, if you're just starting out on your weapon, you kind of want to maximize your DPS at the start, you can use execution sentence for a single target and consecration for big AoE. But again, as you progress through, final verdict does pull ahead of both of them in all situations. At level 30, Fires of Justice kind of your go-to for single target and low amounts, so maybe like 1 to 2 targets, because I like to focus on single target in those situations. So this, kind of a nice default single target choice. And then Zeal, it hits up to 4 things, but it's really good at really 2 to 3 targets, although me personally, I do like to have Fires of Justice for 2 targets as well. So I would recommend this for about 3 targets. And the reason it doesn't do better at 4 is because Greater Judgment is so good at 4 plus targets, because it makes your Judgment, which normally hits 2 enemies, actually hit 4. And so then you're getting full buffed. At 4 targets, you're getting full buff Divine Storms, which is really, really big. Now, anything more than 4, it's still really good because it gets you a lot more damage off of your Divine Storm, and it outperforms the other 2 talents. So again, single target, Fires of Justice, maybe 2 targets as well. Zeal for about 3 targets, and then 4 plus Greater Judgment. Now, level 45, these are all CC talents, they're not super relevant to your DPS, so kind of take whatever you like. Fist of Justice can be pretty nice if you need a stun on a more regular cooldown. It just helps you reduce the cooldown on your Hammer of Justice based on how much holy power you spend. And then Blinding Light, I would like to make a special mention for. It does do decent amounts of damage, so this can be used for kind of nice AoE burst, or just to start off if you have no holy power or something. Or you can use it to try to interrupt multiple adds that are CCable in a fight that are trying to cast or something. It won't actually interrupt them, but it'll stop them, and then it'll probably break instantly, and then they'll start casting again. But it can be pretty useful. So Blinding Light, probably a nice default. I'm just using Fist right now for leveling and doing quests and so on. Now level 60, Blade of Wrath, really, really good default choice. It lowers the cooldown pretty significantly on your Blade of Justice. It replaces it actually, and does a little bit of less damage, but it smooths out your rotation, gets you more holy power, which gets you more relevant damage through Templar's Verdict. And then even for small AoE, that's really good, but if you're doing a lot of AoE, like many, many mobs all the time, Divine Hammer can be really good. It does a lot of AoE damage, it replaces your Blade of Justice, it's not as short a cooldown as Blade of Wrath, but it does a lot of damage, so it's really good if you're doing lots of AoE, and it will pull ahead of Blade of Wrath significantly there. Virtue's Blade, never worth taking. It makes your crits on Blade of Justice do basically 50% more because it's 3 times instead of 2 times damage. It's just not great. It doesn't reduce the cooldown, so you're losing a shorter cooldown on a 2 Holy Power Generator ability, or massive AoE through Divine Hammer. So not worth taking this in any situation. Now level 75, you can kind of pick whatever you like here. They're not super relevant to your damage. Word of Glory, I really don't recommend. It's a 1 minute cooldown first of all, which is pretty long, and it takes 3 holy power, so you're kind of losing out on spending that on damage instead. So it kind of reduces your DPS. Justicar's Vengeance is only useful at all really with Divine Purpose, and I'll get into this, but I don't really recommend this too much. But one thing you can use it for is certainly when you're questing or doing dungeons where you can stun mobs, and you can do a lot of damage, and it heals you for all the damage that you do. So if you need it as an on-demand heal at the expense of a little bit of DPS efficiency, you can take this and use it in those niche situations. That's kind of up to you though. If you're not going to use it though, probably recommend Eye for an Eye. It's a 1 minute cooldown. It does reduce the physical damage you take by 35%, so if there's physical AoE going on, you can use this as a pretty big cooldown, and you counter-attack enemies that hit you in melee combat, so it does have this little small effect there. But it's a decent physical damage reduction cooldown, so that's something I'd probably recommend if you're not taking Divine Purpose. Now, level 90, it's basically a choice between Divine Intervention and Cavalier. Seal of Light, again, takes Holy Power to move, so you're losing DPS by spending Holy Power elsewhere. so I don't recommend this ever, really. Cavalier for movement, basically, so you get 2 charges on your Divine Steed, which charges you around quickly. Or you can take Divine Intervention for survivability, and it reduces the cooldown on your Divine Shield, your big bubble, your immunity, by half, so it's 2.5 minutes instead of 5. And if you dip below a certain amount of health, it'll actually proc like automatically on you. Now, if it's already on cooldown, like you already used it, or you have the Forbearance debuff, it's not going to proc, but basically this prevents you from having to use it manually. And it's kind of nice, and it does reduce the cooldown, so you can use it more often during a fight. So it's up to you here, survivability versus movement. And at level 100, generally the further in you go to your weapon, the better that Crusade gets. So start getting used to using this. But Divine Purpose isn't terrible, it just allows you to get free Holy Power spenders. So when it procs, the next Holy Power ability you use will be free. And that's how you would use Just Cause Vengeance, is only like when it's free, because then it does more damage technically. And it's not about the efficiency there. But even then, as you go through your artifact weapon, Templar's Verdict still becomes better and better. So I don't really recommend Divine Purpose. Crusade is really where you go. And I'll get into how to use this. It's a little different than just popping wings and then kind of going. Now, Holy Wrath, not really that usable. You have to get low, which is dangerous. And then it just does a bunch of damage based on your missing health, and it's a long cooldown, and it's just not quite as synergistic with the rest of your abilities and kind of handling your burst windows. So don't really recommend it. Generally just go with Crusade, especially as you progress through your weapon. So those are your talents. Now let's talk about your spells and abilities. First, I want to make mention of your greater blessings, and you've got 3 of them. You've got Might, Kings, and Wisdom. Kings gives a little absorb shield. It's really, really small and just not that great, so I kind of recommend not using this. And Wisdom can be useful, but you get 1% mana and health every 15 seconds. That's pretty damn slow, so I don't really recommend using this either. Or if your healer is really desperate, I suppose you could. The one you're going to be using most of the time is Greater Blessing of Might, and you're going to want to put this on basically the highest DPS in your group. So, and the damage that it gives, so it gives a % chance for whoever it's on to do extra damage, and it does get recorded under your damage, so don't have people fighting over this. Just look at who's doing the most damage and put it on them. Now, you can only have 3 of these up at a time, so use them on the 3 best that you can find in your group, and then just kind of go. It's a pretty passive thing. So those are your greater blessings. I really recommend just using Might all the time, and they do not stack as far as I know. So if you have multiple Retribution Paladins, make sure you're putting Might on different targets. Otherwise, whoever put it on first is going to get all the credit from that, and not the one who put it on afterward. Now, as far as damage goes, we've got your Judgment, and Judgment's really important. It's got a fairly short cooldown, reduced by haste. It does damage to one target, and it can cleave one more target as well, and it puts this debuff on and makes them take more damage from your Holy Power spenders. This is based on your mastery, so the more mastery you have, the bigger this buff gets, but it's really important because you need to have this up basically anytime you're going to use like Templar's Verdict or Just Cause Vengeance or Divine Storm, anything like that, you want to have this debuff up. Then we've got Crusader Strike. It's your Holy Power builder, your main one. It's got 2 charges, very short cooldown. Right now mine's being reduced by haste and of course the Fires of Justice talent. And then we've got Blade of Wrath, or Blade of Justice is the default. It generates 2 Holy Power. It's got a cooldown that is reduced by haste, and it's pretty simple. If you took Blade of Wrath, it does have a dot component, so just be aware of that. That some of the damage does come as a dot instead of all up front, but pretty simple. It generates 2 Holy Power. And then we've got your spenders. You've got Templar's Verdict, which costs 3 Holy Power and does damage, pretty simple. And then we've got the AoE version, Divine Storm, again 3 Holy Power, and it does AoE damage, pretty simple. We've also got your 2-minute cooldown, your Crusade right now for me, but Avenging Wrath, but baseline. And it's a 2-minute cooldown. Just if it's Avenging Wrath, it buffs your damage and healing by 35% for 20 seconds, and just makes you do a lot of damage. Now, if you took Crusade, what it does is it gives you 3.5% upfront of damage and haste, and then every Holy Power you spend increases that by another 3.5%, and it stacks up to 15 times. It basically speeds up your rotation in your burst window as you spend more Holy Power, and then it gets faster and faster until you hit 15 stacks, and then you're just going really, really fast, and then it just does a lot of damage, and it's really nice with certain talents from your artifact weapon. Now, you do have your artifact ability here. It's called Wake of Ashes. It's a 30-second cooldown, and it does a cleave in front of you. It's kind of a conal effect, and it does a crap ton of damage, or a fair amount of damage. For AoE, it's really, really good. Now, once you get a golden trait in your artifact weapon that we'll get into more, but I'll just show you here, the Ashes to Ashes talent, it makes it do significant damage, so basically over doubles its damage through putting a dot on it on the targets that ticks over 6 seconds. But more importantly, it actually gives you 5 holy power, and this is really, really important to have in your rotation because it allows you to kind of burst better and to fill in dead times when you normally have to build up power. You just 1 global, 5 holy power. It's really, really cool. Aside from that, you've got some utility, of course. You've got your stun, Hammer of Justice, your interrupt, and rebuke. You've got heals. You've got your 10-minute lay on hands, heal someone for your full health. You've got your cleanse, your dispel for poison and diseases, your blessings, so freedom for getting out of snares and roots, your blessing of protection, it removes all physical debuffs from your target and prevents physical damage as well. They can still attack now, so it's not like before where it would prevent you from doing physical attacks, but you still drop aggro. So if you use it on a tank, it's really, really dangerous. Please don't. And then we've got your own Divine Shield, 5-minute cooldown baseline, and it makes you immune. It does not reduce the damage you do anymore, so it's important to note that you don't have to take it off to do max damage anymore. Once you pop it, just let it go. It does not affect your DPS. And then you've got your heal. You can spam Flash of Light, short cooldown, takes some mana, heals them up, and a defensive in Shield of Vengeance, which is a 2-minute cooldown baseline, and you get an absorbed shield, and when it breaks, it blows up and does a bunch of damage to everything in 8 yards and an 8-yard radius around you. And then you've got your movement, of course, in Divine Steed. 45-second cooldown. Right now I have 2 charges because I took Cavalier, the talent over here, but basically for 3 seconds you run at mount speed wherever you like to go, and you can do stuff on it as well. Alright, now let's talk about your artifact weapon, your traits, and kind of how you can path it. Now, no matter how you path it, you do want to go to Ashes first. It's your biggest golden trait. It makes your DPS a lot better, and it buffs your Wake of Ashes artifact ability. It basically doubles its damage, a little bit more even, and it gives you 5 holy power when you use it. So it's really big for burst, which is very important because as a Ret Paladin, you're very burst-centric. So I took the long way around because I knew I'd be able to get it before raid. But if you're in a rush or you just want to get it really quickly, you can go straight to it. Just know you'll pick up some dead talents on the way, these two in particular, Protector of the Ashen Blade and Unbreakable Will. Afterward, no matter which path you take, you do want to go to Echo of the High Lord, and then finally Divine Tempest for golden traits. If you took the path I took, don't forget to take Righteous Blade afterward, because it does increase your Divine Storm damage. And then you can pick up these last 3 talents that are pretty irrelevant to your damage. Healing Storm, Unbreakable Will, and Protector of the Ashen Blade. So those are your traits, and it's kind of up to you how you want to get to Ashes, if you need it right now, or if you're willing to kind of wait a little bit to skip some of these. But again, don't forget you're going to get all of these abilities eventually. So even if you go one way and you're like, I kind of regret it, I really recommend not resetting. It takes a lot of resources. I don't find it worth it. You will get everything eventually, so don't worry too much about that. Quick note about the relics. Generally right now I'm just taking the higher eye level ones, but if I had a choice, pick stuff that increases your damage directly. So things like Longer Crusade I really like, or Avenging Wrath if you're not using Crusade. You're really centered around your burst window, so having an extra 2.5 seconds is actually kind of a big deal. Really nice, and then other stuff like Judgment damage, Blade of Wrath damage, Templar's Verdict, stuff like that. Any damage increasing talents or from your relics are really nice. So now let's talk about your stat priority. Now, I want to make a special mention of Haste. Now, Haste is your best stat, and it reduces the cooldown of a bunch of your abilities, your Crusader Strike, your Blade of Wrath, so you generate holy powers more smoothly, kind of smooths out your whole rotation, and also of your Judgment, which debuffs the target so that you do more damage with your holy power spenders, your Templar's Verdict, for example. Now, there's supposed to be a 30% breakpoint where you can basically keep Judgment up all the time, because the cooldown's reduced enough that it kind of matches up with the duration. I still believe that haste is valuable after this point, but I haven't been able to pull a simcraft on this because all the profiles don't have over 30% haste, and I don't either. So if I find out later that indeed drops off sharply after 30%, I will let you guys know. I'll edit this, put an annotation, something. I will let you guys know. But for now, I'm going to say haste all the way. So haste, just your best secondary stat. Now afterward, critical strike and versatility are pretty close, but crit pulls a little bit ahead. So these are both pretty good though. And then mastery is your worst stat. Now mastery just affects your judgment damage and the debuff that it gives you. So judgment damage doesn't do that much of your damage, and the buff is cool, but you're still missing out on like crit and versatility buff everything. All your damage, potentially. So like even your builders and such. So again, haste, then crit, then versatility, and then mastery for your stats. DPS rotation. Now it's very similar for single target and AoE. The only difference is that in single target or 1 to 2 targets, you'll be using Templar's Verdict, and in AoE, so 3+, you'll be using Divine Storm. That's the only real difference between your single target and AoE rotations. So the concept for Ret Paladin is pretty simple. You just want to build up Holy Power via Crusader Strike and Blade of Wrath or Blade of Justice if you took a different talent, or Divine Hammer if you took that, and then spend it after using Judgment. So spend it on Templar's Verdict or Divine Storm, but just make sure you Judgment first because that will debuff the targets and make you do more damage. So it's basically free damage, and you always want to spend as much Holy Power as possible during Judgment debuff. So when it's up, your main priority is to spend Holy Power. This means you want to pull up beforehand, so probably up to 5 if possible, but never overcap. So if you're already at 5 or you're at 4 and you're trying to use Blade of Wrath, try not to because it will waste Holy Power, which is really bad. You don't want to overcap that. But you also don't want to have stuff on cooldown, like sit around and do nothing for a while. So you'll get a feel for how this is used, but in general, for the builders, you want to use Crusader Strike to make sure it's not at 2 stacks the whole time. You want to have it rolling and on cooldown, and you'll get a feel for it, but that's the general rule of thumb. Keep your Crusader Strike rolling, and then fill in with whatever to build Holy Power, then Judgment, and then spend Holy Power. And that's pretty much how your rotation goes. Build Holy Power, Judgment, spend Holy Power as much as possible. Oh, Judgment is gone. Build Holy Power, Judgment, and then continue, rinse and repeat. Spend Holy Power, so on. Now, your cooldowns, you got 2. You have your Wake of Ashes, which is your artifact ability, and when you get the Ashes to Ashes golden trait, it will do a lot of damage for both single target and AoE, and it gives you 5 Holy Power. So make sure you're empty on Holy Power before you use Wake of Ashes, as long as you have the golden trait. And then, because otherwise you're wasting Holy Power. So you want to be empty, use it, get full 5 Holy Power, continue spending, so on, and just continue rotation after. So it's pretty simple, just keep an eye on it, make sure it's not sitting like there ready to use too long, because you don't want to waste that. That's free 5 Holy Power in 1 global, it's really, really great. Now as far as your cooldown goes, Crusade, if you're using Avenging Wrath, it's very simple, you just pop it and you just continue your rotation, very simple. If you're using Crusade, like I do recommend, it's a little trickier. You do want to pull up as much Holy Power as possible. And this is true whether you're using Crusade or Avenging Wrath. Pull up as much Holy Power as possible, then Judgment, then use the cooldown, and then start spending as much Holy Power as fast as you can. So Templar's Verdicts, and then build up another like Crusader Strike, Templar's Verdict again, Wake of Ashes if you have it, spend as much Holy Power as you can, build it up as fast as you can so that you get to 15 stacks, the maximum, and then just do your rotation. Spend as much Holy Power as you can during Judgment, and Judgment will be up 100% of the time that you need it to be because your haste will be so damn fast. I do want to make a special mention of a rotation that some people are using and have suggested, which is using Justicar's Vengeance twice to build up 10 stacks very, very quickly. Now, I've tested it, and I find that the two right now for me are very close, and kind of the difference is just the variance in random numbers, so a little RNG and crits and stuff. But the further you get into your artifact tree, and especially once you get Might of the Templar and Echo of the High Lord Templars, which is going to pull ahead of the Justicar's Vengeance version, and especially if you get the Legendary Cloak that busts your Divine Storm and Templar's Verdict when you use them in succession, it's going to get better and better. So I recommend just getting used to the Templar's Verdict version, the regular version of it, but if you want to play around with it, it's kind of fun, so I'll mention it here briefly, and it would go something like build up 5 Holy Power, Judgment, Crusade, Justicar's Vengeance takes all your Holy Power, Wake of Ashes gives you all your Holy Power back, Justicar's Vengeance again, and then you're at 10 stacks, and then you just do the regular rotation. And the idea was to get to 10 stacks faster at the expense of damage from Templar's Verdicts. But like I said, it's pretty close right now in how much damage you do, and it's going to get worse and worse to use Justicar's Vengeance as you get more artifact power and different relics that buff your Templar's Verdicts. So, generally in Crusade, build up as much holy power, pull it up, Judgment, do your Templar's Verdict over as much as possible, spend as much as you need to, build up a bit of power, and just keep spending holy power as much as possible. And of course, keep your Judgment up the whole time as you need to. So that's Crusade, and it's very important that you make sure you get maximum damage in Crusade because your DPS is very, very closely linked to your burst rotation. So if you mess up Crusade, your DPS kind of goes out the window. So it's very important that you're good at that. Now I'll go ahead and show you guys on this dummy. Now remember, single target AoE, very, very similar. Just anytime I Templar's Verdict, you would AoE with Divine Storm if that's what you need to do. So just kind of replace that as in the same rotation though. So to open, you want to Wake of Ashes, then Judgment, and then Crusade, and just go off to the races. Spend as much holy power as possible, and then once that's over, go back to your regular rotation and kind of get that feel for how you use your holy power spenders and builders. So I'll start here, and Wake of Ashes to Judgment to Crusade, and then spend holy power. So Crusade Strike to build, spend, build some holy power, spend it, build some more holy power. Now Judgment's coming off, so I'll go ahead and use that before I spend. And then build up some holy power, spend it, and because your haste is so high, you can kind of do it however you like here. Just make sure again you have Judgment up for when you do spend your holy power. Now I see the Wake of Ashes is coming off pretty soon, so you kind of want to prep for that. And I'll use all the holy power I have, then Wake of Ashes to get all of it back, and then spend as much as possible. I can squeeze one more in here. Kind of build up some holy power, and I want to pull up to about 5 holy power if possible. So here I can before I Judgment, because I want to spend as much as possible, as quickly as possible in Judgment. And spend some more here. And then we kind of build up holy power again. Go up to 5. Now you see Wake of Ashes is coming off pretty soon, so I want to make sure that I don't waste too much. So I'll build up here. Use some. Now unfortunately I got a proc there that made it so that I only used 2 there, but so generally though that would have been a Wake of Ashes right away when it was empty. I just didn't want to waste that 1 holy power. And you just kind of build and spend your holy power as much as you can, and of course keep that Judgment window in your head, making sure you're getting the most out of it. Now here I got Wake of Ashes coming off again pretty soon, 10 seconds or so. So just kind of keep an eye on that. Okay, 4 seconds, 3 seconds. So here I'll Judgment because I have that extra buff, and then I'll Wake of Ashes, get all that holy power, and then just keep going like this pretty much. Now I'm just going to go through Crusade. I'll Judgment here once I have 5 holy power. And you do want to make sure your Wake of Ashes and Crusade line up, which is why you don't want to delay your Wake of Ashes too often, because then you have to wait a while like I did because I messed up with that proc I got earlier. So here I'll wait for Wake of Ashes to come off. Now I'll build 5 holy power, and I'll kind of wait here, and I'll Judgment, Crusade, spend again, I'll spend again, Wake of Ashes now, and then spend. Judgment of course, and just kind of go like this, and this is your burst rotation again. So pretty much what you need to do, and then Judgment of course all the time before you spend on Templar's Verdict or Divine Storm. And that's pretty much your rotation. So just get a feel for when you need to use things. Again, general rule of thumb, when your Crusader Strike is at 2 stacks, use it. Otherwise, if it's at 1 and it's recharging, you can use Blade of Wrath. And it just kind of goes like that. So that's your DPS rotation. Now, as far as macros and add-ons go, I don't really use... I am using a macro actually right now. It's because I got an unused Trinket that has a 2-minute cooldown, lines up perfectly with Crusade. And it's just pretty simple. I can link it in the bottom if you happen to get a Trinket. Just replace the Trinket name, of course, with whatever you have. So it's just show the tooltip for Avenging Wrath, and it will update to Crusade. So I use the base one. I'll then use the Trinket, cast Avenging Wrath, and then it's pretty simple. But other than that, I don't really use anything. I do use Mousovers for some of my blessings, which I can link as well in the description below. And it's just so that you don't have to target them. You can just go over to your frames, press 5, and I got Blessing Protection on them, stuff like that. But it's pretty simple. I'll show you here. And then as far as add-ons, of course, I have Weak Auras, which I'm using to track a bunch of stuff. I have it tracking Fires of Justice, so I know when I'm going to have that free or that lower cost of Holy Power spenders. I've got the Judgment timer and indicator, so it's easy for me to tell, can I fit in another Templar's Verdict or Divine Storm before I have the Judgment again? And then the cooldowns, of course, of Wake of Ashes and Avenging Wrath. And I actually have the cooldown of Judgment as well, just as an extra little thing that I can track to make sure that I know when Judgment's coming up. And I actually have a little script thing that I kind of wrote. I can link that as well, or I'll link to the macros, my macros paste bin. But it's a little script, and it can move, as you saw, the holy power bar wherever you like. And basically, you can just kind of move it by changing the coordinates on it. And I believe it is over here. So this is what it looks like. You change whatever the 2 here to whatever scale you want to make it bigger or smaller. And then the 0, -60 coordinates, you can move it around, change that. But it looks a little weird because they have the chains here for a cool effect under your bar. But if you want it more centralized so you don't have to look down at all, or if you have your health bars up here and you don't want it to look over there, you can check that out as well. That's pretty much it for this video, so I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope it helped you guys out, kind of understand how Ret works and how to play it. And if you liked the video, feel free to hit it with a like. If you want to see more content like this from me, feel free to subscribe to the channel so you can see when I put out new content. Thanks for watching, guys. Cheers.